See, the stupid is first and foremost in my mind, since I cover the news cycle every single day. You know things are stupid when Alexandra Ocasio-Cortez is being hailed as a great intellect inside the Democratic Party. I will say there is something wonderfully amusing about watching our amazing journalistic firefighters in the media rush to defend every dumb thing that she, like, whatever says. This week, for example, she suggested that the detention centers down on the border in which we process illegal immigrants, you know, the places that Democrats are trying to defund so that there aren't enough beds or resources to actually take care of those illegal immigrants. She suggested that they were like concentration camps and then never again. And the entire media rose to her defense as one, except for Chuck Todd, ironically, weirdly enough. And they all suggested that what she actually meant was not concentration camps, you know, like Nazi concentration camps, despite the fact that she used a specific Holocaust phrase, never again. No, what they actually meant, what she actually meant was the long history of concentration camps. Because as we all know, AOC is a historian and an expert on the Boer War, which is where concentration camps began. Now, I think there's a better shot that AOC thinks a concentration camp is just a camp where people go to concentrate than that she thinks that concentration camps have anything to do with the Boer War. But I'm looking forward to the day when AOC actually declares the earth is flat and the media rush to defend her and proclaim that she is fact-check correct. Actually, she's right. And it's actually Donald Trump's fault. It used to be round, but now the earth is flat because of Trump somehow. This stupidity is extending to the Democratic primaries. Just to give you tonight's update, the Democrats are all in on bashing Joe Biden for making the relatively innocuous statement that he has worked with people whose views he considers evil and bad, including segregationists, in the past, and that they have tried to treat each other civilly. This is apparently unacceptable inside the Democratic Party, trying to treat people who disagree with you, even people whose ideas you find disgusting, civilly. You can't do that anymore. And so people are jumping all over Joe Biden. Again, I'll admit to a bit of Schadenfreude. This is the same guy who suggested that Mitt Romney was a vicious racist who wanted to put black people back in chains. So watching Joe Biden get dragged through the mud doesn't bother me any. I'm not going to lose much sleep over it. At the same time, the Democratic Party has become so radical that it does give one a sense of disquieting unease. When you feel as though the ground is moving beneath you. When you feel as though you can't say basic things that are true. Things like communism is bad. Or a man is a man and a woman is a woman. If you say these sorts of things, then you are cast out of polite society. And that really means that there are stakes to this clown show. It's all dumb, but there are actual stakes to that. And that's why activism is really, truly important. So tonight I want to give you 7 tips on activism as you move forward into your college career. It shouldn't take too long, then we'll do some Q&A, which is really the fun part. So, first tip. Read. So I know everybody wants to be on TV. And listen, I've been doing this since I was 17 years old. I remember being your age wasn't all that long ago, although I can't say that for much longer. But, I mean, it's starting to get weird when you guys are closer to my children's age than you are to my age. It's disturbing to me. But one of the things that because there's so many media outlets, because there's such a hunger for conservative content, there is an incentive structure that leads people to get out there before they are ready. It leads people to get out in the public eye before they have fully formed thoughts. And that's a dangerous thing. I mean, as somebody who's writing a syndicated column at 17, I can guarantee you that most of my stupidest ideas came in the first 5 years of writing that column. Because when you are young, you think that every idea that comes through your head is a good one, whether it is car surfing or whether it is whatever you decide to put in a column today. What this means is that this is a great time for you to educate yourselves, to read, to know more than your peers. One of the things that they won't tell you about politics, dirty little secret about politics, people who are experts on a topic are people who have read 10 books on a topic. People who are qualified to speak on TV about a topic are people who have read an article on a topic. Be the person who reads 10 books on the topic, not the person who read the article on the topic. And this means listen more than you talk, at least for now. And the second tip is that you should understand your own principles. And this is part and parcel of reading a lot and of having discussions with folks. You really need to understand what you believe at a core root level. There's a lot of pressure in politics to sort of follow the leader. There's a lot of pressure to think like a person who you admire. And I've always encouraged folks that they shouldn't always just defend somebody they admire because they admire that person. Maybe the person has a bad idea. Now, I love Ronald Reagan. That doesn't mean that every single thing that Ronald Reagan ever did is something that I agree with. Most of what he said I agree with, and that means that he's a hero to me. He committed acts of great heroism as president of the United States. That doesn't mean that I agreed with his spending policies. I don't even think Ronald Reagan agreed with his spending policies, to be frank with you. Also, as a subset of understanding your own principles, you need to follow the evidence. And that means that you should be constantly guided by new facts and new evidence that are brought to bear. If you're not changing your mind constantly, if you're not constantly rethinking and integrating new facts, then you're not doing your job. If your perspective is so thickened that nothing is able to penetrate it, then you essentially become akin to a leftist. Because many of the folks on the left are not interested. In fact, they're interested in their feelings about the world. And any fact that is brought to bear is considered taboo. If the left has a narrative that the United States is rooted in racism, sexism, bigotry, and homophobia, that all disparities are discrimination, and then they are confronted with the fact that not all disparities are discrimination, that in fact personal choice has a lot to do with both group and individual disparity, if they're confronted with any statistics along those lines, their immediate jump is to you're a racist. Why? Because the narrative has been challenged. Don't be that. If your narrative is challenged by a fact, maybe you need to adjust your narrative to fit the fact, or maybe you need to determine whether the fact is true or not. As also part of understanding your own principles, you do have to recognize that there are certain principles that are immutable. And this is what conservatism really is about at root. Conservatism, to use the G.K. Chesterton metaphor, conservatism is different from leftism in the following way. If you're a leftist and you walk through a field and you see a fence in the middle of the field and you have no idea why that fence is there, your first instinct is to uproot the fence. I don't know why the fence is there, I'm taking it out. If you're a conservative and you see a fence in the middle of a field, your first instinct should be to say, I don't know why the fence is there. I'm going to learn why the fence is there, and then maybe I will consider whether that ought to be removed. And that means looking at the lessons of history and recognizing that they have something to teach us. This has something to do with the conservative mindset, having a level of gratitude for those who came before, trying to understand the ideas of people who came before you, and determining maybe why those ideas have been durable, what was good about those ideas, what needs to be maintained about those ideas. When folks wonder why the conservative movement has such reverence for the founding, it's because the results of the founding are the greatest upswell in human freedom and prosperity in the history of humanity. And that is also true because the founding embodied certain immutable and eternally true principles, principles we have not always lived up to, but principles that were true when they were written. And this is Lincoln's point about the Declaration of Independence. When Thomas Jefferson wrote, all men are created equal and have inalienable rights, when Jefferson wrote that, he was holding slaves at the time. But Lincoln said that was an immutable, eternal principle that we didn't live up to. And it is our job to make those principles apply to everyone the way that they were originally supposed to. It was articulated as a high principle by Jefferson for a reason, even if he didn't personally live up to that principle in his own life. Those principles matter. And the conservative principles, the ones that really matter, are limited government created solely to protect rights that come from nature and nature's God. That is conservatism in a nutshell. The founders thought that was self-evidentiarily true. I don't think it's self-evidentiarily true. I think that it is an outgrowth of 3,000 years of Judeo-Christian history and Greek reason. I think there are long roots to this. If it were self-evidentiarily true, then everyone would believe it everywhere. But it was self-evident to people who have been educated in the precepts of Western civilization and who founded the country. So educate yourself about those precepts. Realize why those principles matter. And the third tip for activists, this one is very practical. Stay off social media. Stay off of it. You know, really. Have a news feed on Twitter. Have a news feed on Facebook. Check Instagram. Don't post anything for the rest of your life. Social media ruins your life. I don't just mean this in terms of you post something and then 10 years later people come after you with something that you posted, which is the current sport. The virtue signaling by which people go back into the past, grab something, then use it as a club against you. No, it doesn't matter that you're high schoolers, by the way. They'll do it. It doesn't matter. I mean, it really has no relevance what age you are. As long as you are an enemy, they will do whatever they can to ruin you. It's not just that. It's also that social media contributes to a really ugly sense of self-aggrandizement. You think people are thinking about you all the time because you're in conversations with them all the time. This is particularly true of Twitter. I have very close friends who I think were very negatively affected by their overuse of social media. Don't fall into that trap. It's something I'm speaking as basically an AA member about social media here. I'm gradually attempting to wean myself from it, and I'm in withdrawal now, and it's very difficult, and relapses are frequent. But there will come a point at which I have discovered, I think, the best way to use social media. But if you can avoid it, don't get sucked into the maw that is social media, particularly too early before you have fully formed thoughts, because it's a really ugly environment out there right now. It's an argument of it's in time of seek and destroy. They're trying to find people and ruin them. It's not good faith conversation happening on Twitter. It's how can I ruin your life with something that you're saying today by misconstruing it or taking it out of context. That's how things work. So if you can avoid that, avoid it. A fourth tip, and this is hard given what I've just said. You need to stay open-minded to people who disagree with you so long as they are open-minded with you. And this is very difficult because sometimes you can't tell whether somebody is open-minded until you're way along in the conversation. Sometimes they act like they're open-minded and want to have a discussion, and then you realize two-thirds of the way in that this person is actually a militant activist who hates your guts and considers you a lesser human being. Still, as a good person, you should constantly, as I say, be turning over your own ideas and evaluating your own character and taking criticism seriously. At the same time, there has to be a quick protection mechanism, and that is when you realize that something is a bad faith criticism, when you realize that people are saying things to you just to be ugly or hurtful or to attack your character, the curtain has to come down immediately. It has to descend immediately, and that's the end of the conversation, and that's the end of the communication. This is probably good life advice in personal relationships as well, by the way. Surround yourself with people who are going to give you honest advice, but not people who find revelry in tearing you down or making you feel bad about yourself.